I hope everybody is having a good Sunday afternoon. This week we're going to continue about our attitudes, and we're on the fourth attitude, and we're going to talk about selfishness. We've already covered anger, hatred, and jealousy, so we have gotten to selfishness. And I don't know about you, but me, I struggle with this at times, and I think a lot of people do, and we see a lot of selfishness every day in our world. Philippians 2:3 says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves." We are to do nothing from selfish ambition. We're going to jump right in, and we're going to go to Matthew chapter 25, and I'm going to read 31 through 46. And in the heading, the title in my Bible, this is called the Final Judgment. So we are going to read about this and then talk about the selfishness in it. So again, it's Matthew 25, 31 through 46. "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' Then the righteous will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?' And the king will answer them, 'Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me.' Then he will say to those on his left, 'Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.' Then they will also answer, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you?' Then he will answer them, saying, 'Truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life.'" These verses tell us that selfishness can cost us to be lost eternally. If we go back to 42 through 46, the examples he gives: "I was hungry, you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, you did not welcome me. I was naked, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." I never really thought of this as being selfish. I always thought of it as something that is expected of Christians to do. I've heard all my life, if someone needs clothes, you find a way to get them clothes. If someone needs food, you give them food. If they need some place to stay, whether it be at your house, a friend's house, somehow figure out where they get shelter from the weather outside. That's just how I grew up. That's what I've always been taught. So I never thought of this as being selfish. But I can see after doing this devotional how it could be taken as selfish. I know someone who's hungry, but I just go on about my way. I have an extra $5 to run through and get them a meal. Or I had extra because my kids didn't eat dinner that night, so there's always extra food. I could give an elderly person the plate. What Elizabeth and Austin both eat together would be enough for a plate for an elderly person. And I know this person's in need, but I don't take it to them. That kind of puts a different twist on it, don't it? That's me being selfish. Or I know the weather has turned cold here, and I know someone doesn't have a coat. I can afford to go buy a coat, or better yet, if most of you are like me, you probably have 4 or 5 coats hanging in the closet. I've got one for the rain, one for the wind, one for the snow, one for just because, and one because I just liked it, and it's just sitting in the closet. I could probably part with one of those, couldn't I, if someone really needed it. You all get my point. Take it from that viewpoint, and I do see where this could be taken as someone being selfish. When someone needs help and we refuse, we turn our heads, we act like we don't see the situation, we don't want to get involved, we just don't want to do it. As the verses we just read talk about, are we on the left or are we on the right? Can you think of some selfish people in the Bible? So we're going to talk about 3 of them. Two of them really stood out to me. One I really didn't think of, but he was selfish. But we're going to start with the rich young ruler in Matthew 19. And we're going to go to verse 16 through 22. So Matthew 19, 16 through 22. And behold, a man came up to him saying, Teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life? And he said to him, Why do you ask me about what is good? There is only one who is good. If you would enter life, keep the commandments. He said to him, Which ones? And Jesus said, You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The young man said to him, All these I have kept. What do I still lack? Jesus said to him, If you would be perfect, go, sell what you possess and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. When the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Here we see that Jesus told this young ruler that he needed to sell his possessions and give his money from what he sold to the poor. And this just crushed this young ruler. He moped. He says he got sorrowful. He hung his head. I can just see him Jesus just turned his world upside down. He was totally devastated. He did not want to give up his riches. Are we like this man? Do we not want to give up our riches to help those in need? Let's go to Luke 12, 13 verses 13 through 20. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable, saying, The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. Again, we see someone being selfish. We see that this man was concerned about how he's going to store his crops. And we also see that he has more than he could ever need. And it was going to last him for years. So instead of helping the needy or giving some to the poor, he was only concerned about himself and what he was going to do with his extra abundance of food. And this made me think of the story of Ruth. And the poor people who they had to leave the outsides of their fields, what grew on the very edges, they left for the poor so the poor could come and cut off. That's what I thought about this man. Every day there were people coming to his fields, gleaning the edges of his crops. And he could have went to any one of those and said, Hey, I've got extra. And I don't know, I guess this is just because I'm in the Christmas spirit. I like to give. That's my favorite thing. Matt has to hold me back because if I could, I would buy something for everybody or I would make something for everybody. That's just me. And this kind of reminded me, I guess, with all the Christmas stuff going on in my head with what's going on at home in this time of year, I thought, if I was this man, I'd be the first ones out there giving them my extra food. I don't need it. But are we like this man? Do we fall into the category of, I have a lot, I want to keep a lot, I know I'm secure, but I want to make sure I'm secure, I'm not going to share with the needy? Do we think, and I do think that we are right in making sure our family is taken care of first. I really do. I think that comes first. But then anything of abundance, what do we do with it? Do we say, okay, my family's taken care of, but I want to make sure I have a little extra, but then how much more is a little extra? And I find myself falling into that category. Let's use money. That's easy for me. We have a set amount. We have Matt's salary. We know what Matt's salary is. We have our bills. We know exactly each week what is due. Okay, so we've got the bills covered. We have X amount left over. What am I going to do with that X amount? Well, in my mind, I'm like, well, the truck might break down. The kids might get sick. We might, run into an extra expense. We need to keep a certain amount over here for that. Well, okay, that cuts us down to a little bit more extra, but I still have extra. What am I going to do with that extra? Well, like I told you earlier, we know this person, it's getting cold. They don't have a coat. Maybe their child doesn't have good warm clothes. You see them at school. What am I going to do with that? And that's where I have a hard time. I find myself, even though I want to help people, I find myself in the what if. Well, if I take this X amount of money and I go help this child, what happens tomorrow when my kid comes down with a fever and we've got strep or we've got the flu or we've got something? I need money to pay those doctor bills. That's where I have to shift myself and live and trust that God will do what he says he's going to do. God says he will provide for us. God says he'll give us all that we need. And I have to trust that. And how do I know that? Because the Bible tells us. I have always gotten by. I've always had food to eat. I always have clothes to wear, a house over my head. But sometimes we all get a little selfish and we want more. The end of this account, this man dies. His result is death. And when he died, what was he remembered as or for? Being stingy, being selfish, wondering what he could do for himself. The bigger barns, what he could do. When we pass, do we want to be remembered as someone who is selfish or someone who is always willing to help someone in any way that they can? The last person I want to talk about this afternoon is Nabal, and he's a bad person. He was a very selfish man. And we find this story in 1 Samuel 25, and you can read the whole chapter, but I'm just going to read the first 17 verses. Then David rose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. And there was a man in Moab whose business was in Carmel. The man was very rich, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. He was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. The woman was discerning and beautiful, but the man was harsh and badly behaved. He was a Calebite. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. And thus you shall greet him. Peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. I hear that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on feast day. Please give us whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David." When David's young men came, they all said this to Nabal in the name of David, and then they waited. And Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is David? Who is this son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed from my shearers and give it to men who come from I don't know where?" So David's young men turned away and came back and told him all of this. And David said to his men, "Every man strap on your sword." And every man of them strapped on his sword. David also strapped on his sword. And about 400 men went up after David, while 200 remained with the baggage. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to greet our master, and he railed at them. Yet the men were very good to us, and we suffered no harm, and we did not miss anything when we were in the fields, as long as we went with them. They were a wall to us both by day and night, all the while we were with them keeping his sheep. Now, therefore, know this and consider what you should do. For harm is determined against our master and against all his house. And he is such a worthless man that one cannot speak to him." So this is the account. We're going to stop right there. We see here that David and his men needed some food. And Nabal quickly said no. He's like, "I don't know David. I don't know the son of Jesse. I don't know who this person is. There's lots of people saying they're different people. Lots of people have escaped, run away." So he said no. It didn't take him any time to say no. Was he being kind? Nabal was being selfish because he had more than he needed and could spare some food, and he didn't even hesitate when he said no to David. If we were to keep reading past verses 17, we see that Abigail was told what happened, and she quickly went to work and made things right. She took David and his men a lot of food. They made peace, and that's when Abigail decides that he wants to marry that's when David decides he wants to marry Abigail, and the rest of the story. You all can read that later. But Nabal was selfish. And what did that cost him? Trouble with his wife. When we look at the three men, the rich young ruler, the farmer, and Nabal, what did selfishness get them? The rich young ruler, he pouted. It ruined him. It devastated him. It ruined his life. He was just moping. He was the saddest person. It killed him. It ruined him. I don't know how to say it. It just totally turned his world upside down. The farmer that had extra amount of crops and wouldn't give up, it resulted in death. Nabal, it resulted with conflict with his wife, and it resulted in someone now wanting to kill him. David was strapped and ready to go, ready to kill him. And so none of these three examples of being selfish turned out good. And I cannot think of one time in my life where being selfish was a good thing or had good results. So as Christians, we need to make sure we are not like the rich young ruler, we're not like the farmer, or we're not like Nabal. So let's try this week to be less selfish. We've ended a couple of weeks with the song. And the song this week is "You Never Mentioned Him to Me." When in the better land before the bar we stand, how deeply grieved our souls will be. If any lost one there should cry in deep despair, you never mentioned him to me. Oh, let us spread the word wherever it may be heard, help groping souls the light to see, that yonder none may say, you showed me not the way, you never mentioned him to me. A few sweet words may guide a lost one to his side, or turn sad eyes on Calvary. So work as days go by, that yonder none may cry, you never mentioned him to me. You never mentioned him to me. You helped me not the light to see. You met me day by day and knew I was astray, yet never mentioned him to me. Let's not be selfish in our material things for sure. If we have extra, especially, like I said, I must be in like the given mood, the given season. But in our material things, let's not be selfish. If we see someone in need, help them. Or if you can't help them, find them help. But most importantly, let's not be selfish in telling others about Christ. That is the most important thing. Everybody needs to know about Christ. Everybody needs to have an opportunity to know about Christ. And don't just assume that people know. And I know that sounds ridiculous in this day and age, but I think of this quite often. I do not know my neighbors. We just moved into the neighborhood, 2 years ago. And I guess I'm not a friendly neighbor. I don't go introduce myself. But we have correspondence. Hi, how are you? But if you were to ask me if any one of my neighbors was a Christian, I know one of them and pretty well, and I could say yes to that one. But the other ones across from me and down the street the other way, I have no clue. And when I was doing this devotional, I thought, this kind of hit home. What if one of them was to pass? One of them was to move? We have rental houses all around us, so they come in and out quite frequently. And so what? Am I missing the opportunity? Am I being selfish because I don't want to go and stick my neck out, be made fun of? When we were moving in, it was no secret because we had the Fulton Church of Christ van in our driveway every day while we were moving. So they know. They know we go to church somewhere. They may not know anything else. But if you asked me if any one of them go to church, have a Bible, knew about God, I couldn't tell you. Now, some of you all might because you all have been here all your life. But my point is, don't be selfish. And I got to work on this myself. Don't be selfish telling other people about God. Don't assume that they know. Don't assume they go to church somewhere. Don't assume that they don't want to hear the word. So maybe there's an easier aspect. To me, it's easier to help someone with clothing, food, shelter than it is to go up and say, hey, do you go to church anywhere? Have you ever been to church? But let's not be selfish in the most important thing, and that is telling others about Christ, showing the godly example, being the Christians that we need to be day in and day out. So I hope you all have a great week, and I will see you all here next week. Thank you for listening.